They shook hands over a lie. That's how it started. Not with a betrayal, not with a slap in the face or a knife in the back. Just a handshake, firm, friendly, final. I remember the weight of that moment more than anything else. The late summer air, the smell of oil and gravel, and the silver coin he pressed into my palm like it meant something. "Someday," he said, "we'll look back at this and laugh." That was 15 years ago. I haven't laughed since. Back then, we were just two guys trying to survive. Jared and I met in the military, same unit, different worlds. He was polished, charming, good at working a room. I was the one who got the job done while he took the credit. I didn't mind, at least not then. He had dreams, plans, a knack for selling ideas to people with deep pockets. I had tools, loyalty, and 1 foot in reality. After discharge, he pitched me a vision, a small auto repair shop, but with a twist, eco-friendly, fast service, a customer-first model. He had the investors, he just needed someone to build it from the ground up. His exact words, "You'll be more than a partner, you'll be the backbone." He didn't offer a contract, just that coin, an old silver dollar, a little worn but clean. He said it had belonged to his grandfather, a symbol of integrity passed down through generations. It was supposed to be my proof, my stake, my reminder. For the first 5 years, I worked without days off. I handled every engine, every angry customer, every midnight tow. Jared played the frontman, podcasts, TV spots, sponsorship deals. The brand took off. We became they. And eventually, they became just him. The first time I noticed the shift, it was subtle, a marketing flyer. Founded by Jared Colburn. No mention of me. I laughed it off, didn't want to seem petty, but the erasure kept happening. One client, one article, one credit at a time. I brought it up once. His answer, "Come on, man, you hate the spotlight. I'm protecting you." Protecting me. Like I was a fragile secret. The coin stayed in my drawer. Every time I opened it, it glinted like an insult. I started seeing it for what it was, a placeholder instead of a promise. The breaking point came quietly. Jared announced a major expansion, franchises across 3 states. And at the press conference, someone asked, "Who was your biggest supporter when you started?" He smiled, looked dead into the camera and said, "Myself. Sometimes you have to be your own team." No mention, not even a passing nod. That night, I packed my tools into the back of my truck and left. No warning, no confrontation. I took the coin, shoved it in my glove box, and drove until the road stopped talking. I disappeared for almost a year. Small towns, quiet jobs, no social media, just enough to get by. I wasn't running, I was reloading. People think revenge is about rage, but it's not. It's patience, calculation, letting silence do the sharpening. By the time I returned to the city, Jared had forgotten how I started the company, but the company hadn't. I still had emails, drafts, sketches, the early invoices with both our names, and the coin. I didn't come back to yell or beg, I came to remind. The opportunity came wrapped in gold, literally. Jared was set to receive a local business leadership award, full ceremony, black tie, sponsors, press, a stage. I wasn't invited, but I knew how to get in. I knew the back entrances, the weak spots in their logistics. I'd built the damn shop, after all. I'd watched him use my foundation to climb a ladder he never earned. I didn't plan to cause a scene, just leave something behind. When his name was called, I stood backstage in the shadow of the spotlight. I could hear the applause, the hollow compliments, the polished speech he gave about hard work and self-made grit. When the room laughed at his jokes, I stepped forward quietly and placed a small box on the podium for him to find after the show. Inside was the coin and a note. "I was the team. You were the story. Let's see how well your story holds without the truth." I didn't wait around for the fallout. I walked away just as he opened the box, just as the color drained from his face. He knew what it meant. This wasn't revenge, this was balance. The day after the award show, my phone rang 6 times before noon. I didn't answer. Not because I was afraid, because I already knew what every call would sound like. Panicked confusion, polished damage control, maybe even a guilt-laced plea, carefully worded to avoid saying the only thing that mattered, you were right. Instead, I let it all ring out, then turned off the ringer completely. By evening, my inbox was full. Jared's assistant, a board member, 2 journalists, and someone I hadn't heard from in years. Marcus, one of our first mechanics. His message was short. Man, you didn't burn the bridge, you exposed the blueprint. That stayed with me. It wasn't about revenge anymore, it was about clarity, about making it impossible for him to rewrite the story one more time. By the second day, it hit the trades. Shadow partner behind EcoDrive's Founding Steps Forward. A blog picked up the coin angle, then a podcast. They didn't name me directly, I hadn't given any interviews, but the message had landed, loudly. The public loved a hidden architect narrative, especially when the star turned out to have built his image on borrowed bricks. Jared responded 2 ways. First, silence, then spin. He posted a carefully crafted message across platforms, thanking everyone who's helped build the dream, conveniently avoiding names or specifics. His version of the truth was coated in ambiguity, hoping to smooth over a crack that had become too deep to ignore. But cracks don't go away when you cover them, they spread. Later that week, someone leaked internal emails. Early ones, my name, my plans, even my writing, attached to business models and timelines he'd passed off as his own. I didn't leak them, but I wasn't surprised someone else did. Resentment runs quiet until it doesn't. That night, I got a voicemail. It was him. Look, I know things went sideways. I never meant for it to feel like I erased you, but we both know business is messy. I had to make hard choices. You weren't cut out for the front, I was. You kept the engine running, sure, but I steered the car. I replayed that line 4 times. You kept the engine running, but I steered the car. It wasn't an apology, it was a eulogy, with me buried in the footnotes. I didn't call him back. Instead, I booked a meeting with a mid-sized business network that focused on founders with unconventional paths. They'd reached out after the blog article. They wanted to hear my version, not the scandal, not the bitterness, just the work, the process, the truth. When I walked into the room, it wasn't applause that greeted me. It was something better, attention without assumption. I laid out my journey, the build, the silence, the erasure, and then the decision to stop waiting for recognition and claim space on my own terms. I didn't trash Jared. I didn't need to. The facts spoke louder than resentment ever could. After the session, a younger guy, maybe mid-20s, waited until the crowd thinned. How did you know when it was time to speak up? I didn't have to think. When staying quiet became a form of self-erasure. He nodded like he understood. That moment did more for me than 1,000 online arguments ever could. Because here's the thing no one tells you about being erased. It's not always loud. Sometimes it looks like people thanking everyone but you. Sometimes it sounds like you wouldn't understand at meetings you should have led. Sometimes it's a silver coin in a drawer, daring you to forget what it really meant. But the truth doesn't go away just because someone stops saying it out loud. A month later, I launched something new. Not a rival business, not a press campaign, something quieter. A consultancy for small-town builders, mechanics, freelancers, solo founders, people who were tired of being the hands behind someone else's name. I called it Backline, not because I wanted credit, because I wanted others to stop losing theirs. Word got around. My first 3 clients didn't find me through ads, they found me through whispers. People talk, especially when someone finally tells the story they've been forced to keep quiet. I still keep the coin, not in a drawer anymore, but in a small frame on my desk. Not as a reminder of betrayal, but as a marker of change. He gave it to me thinking it was a symbol of partnership. It turned out to be a receipt. I didn't expect him to show up in person, not after everything, not after the leak, the fallout, the media storm that left his reputation bruised, but not broken. But 3 months later, there he was. I was finishing up a session with a client, an ex-bartender turned app founder, when I saw the familiar outline through the glass door. Jared didn't knock. He waited. The way people do when they don't know if they're supposed to be forgiven or forgotten. I let him wait. When the room cleared, I opened the door. No invitation, just space. He stepped in like a man rehearsing humility, quiet but calculated. "You're hard to get a hold of," he said. "I know." We stood in silence for a moment too long. Then he dropped it, his version of peace. "I came to say thanks. You could have burned everything. You didn't." I looked at him. "I didn't have to. You lit the match a long time ago. I just stopped pretending it wasn't fire." He smiled like he wanted to argue but didn't have the energy or the moral ground. Then he reached into his pocket and placed something on the table between us, a duplicate coin. "I had another one made," he said. "Figured we'd each keep one, full circle." I didn't touch it. "I already have the original." He nodded, then pulled back the replica, tucked it away. That was the difference between then and now. I didn't need to grab the power. I already had it. He cleared his throat. "You really built this, huh? All of it?" I didn't answer. The question was performative. He knew the answer. He just wanted to hear me say it. Validate him. I didn't. "I've been thinking about stepping back," he continued, "letting someone else run the show for a while." I knew what that meant. He was losing ground, not because of me, but because people had started seeing him without the polish. Legacy built on image can't survive a crack in the mirror. "Do what you need to," I said, "but don't frame it as growth if it's just retreat." That landed. He blinked, then straightened. I thought he might try again, soften, reframe, find the angle that used to work on me. But he didn't. He just said, "You're not who you used to be." I looked him in the eye. "No, I'm who I was before you tried to edit me." And with that, he left. No dramatic exit, no final word. Just the sound of a door closing on something I didn't need anymore. Weeks passed. My name stayed out of the press. The buzz quieted, and I let it. Not every fire needs to stay lit. Sometimes the win is in the stillness that follows. Backline grew. More clients, more stories, more people stepping into their power. I didn't advertise, I didn't campaign, I just showed up. Word of mouth did the rest. One evening, I received a message from a woman I'd never met. Subject: "We met through silence." The email was brief. "Your story came across my desk. I'd been building in the shadows too. Thank you for making the rest of us feel visible." Attached was a portfolio, branding samples, campaign strategy drafts, all meticulous, brilliant, buried. Her name was Daisy Lang. I smiled at the screen. Something about her voice in the message felt familiar. Firm but kind, edged with clarity. The kind of clarity that doesn't ask to be believed. We scheduled a call. When she answered, there was no awkwardness, no posturing, just a shared understanding. She didn't ask about Jared. I didn't ask about her family. We talked about truth, about what it costs, and why we keep paying for silence until it chokes us. By the end of the call, I offered her a collaboration, a mentorship event, 2 voices, 2 versions of the same battle. She said yes. We launched the joint event 6 weeks later. Title: Unwritten: When They Stop Telling Your Story, Start Telling Your Own. Full house. Not just founders, creatives, educators, students. People tired of sitting at the edge of their own lives. I went first, told my story like I always did, straight, stripped of theatrics. Then Daisy stepped up. Her words were quieter, more surgical, but they cut just as deep. She spoke of tables that only allowed her presence as decoration, of choosing dignity over access, of walking away from narratives that never included her to begin with. When she finished, the silence was thick, not stunned, just full, like people were realizing they weren't alone for the first time. Someone asked us both, "How do you forgive the people who wrote you out?" Daisy answered before I could. You don't have to forgive to move forward, you just have to stop asking them to understand. I still think about Jared sometimes, not with anger, not with longing, with distance. Not every injustice needs confrontation, some just need exposure. Not every scar needs to be explained, some are just maps. And not every coin is currency, some are receipts. I keep mine right where it belongs, under glass, next to the first client invoice I ever signed under my own name. No spotlight, no revenge speeches, just ownership. We didn't call it a partnership, not officially. There were no papers, no signatures, no need. Daisy and I knew the shape of what we were building, and neither of us needed to draw borders to protect it. She said once, "I'm not here to recreate the old system, I'm here to replace it." I understood that, more than she knew. The event took off like wildfire. A dozen clips from the talk hit social media within 24 hours. Not because we asked, because people recognized something in it, their own silence, their own erasure, and the moment they realized they could step out of it. The next week, 2 corporate offers landed in our inboxes. One from a talent agency that wanted to package our voice. Another from a media group offering a 6-episode documentary deal. Both included one phrase that made us say no immediately. Reframe your story for broader appeal. We didn't need a reframing. The whole point was that we were finally telling the story without edits. The more we declined, the more curious they got, especially one name that had been silent for months, Jared. He hadn't reached out since that day in my studio. No messages, no press statements, not even a whisper. Until Daisy got the email. It came late. Subject line, "An opportunity to heal together." I read it over her shoulder. It was polished, smooth, predictable. A pitch for a joint panel hosted by a major business summit. They wanted a reconciliation moment. The founder, the forgotten partner, and the next generation voice coming together to inspire. Jared offered to share the stage. The catch? He'd already agreed to headline it. We'd be guests in the narrative. Daisy didn't reply. She just tilted her screen toward me and said, "You know this move better than I do." I did. It wasn't about resolution. It was about optics. Jared had always been good at that, collecting people like trophies, turning apologies into branding. But this wasn't his story anymore. We drafted a joint response. No anger, no bitterness, just this. Healing doesn't happen under spotlights, and we don't share stages with people still rewriting the past in real time. We never heard back, but someone else did. A quiet leak to a business podcast. The summit panel that almost was. They turned it into a segment. Speculation, sound bites, opinions from people who weren't there when it mattered. It didn't bother us. Not because we didn't care, but because we didn't need to explain. That was the lesson. Not every attack needs defense. Some things are self-evident when you keep showing up in truth. 3 weeks later, we hosted a closed retreat. 20 guests, founders, mentors, students, no media, no live stream, no branded walls, just stories, strategy, unlearning. Halfway through the second day, during a breakout session, Daisy asked a question I hadn't heard her voice aloud before. What do we do when the people who hurt us start watching? Not to apologize, but to copy. It was quiet. Everyone heard it. A woman across the circle, a non-profit director from Milwaukee, said, "Let them, but let them know they're not welcome in what they mimic." And that became the tone of everything that followed. We stopped hiding our growth, stopped shrinking to seem less threatening. We published more, hosted more, built an archive of resources for people starting from scratch with no safety net. Every file carried our names, no fine print, no ghost contributors. The more visible we became, the more the watchers came out. Not trolls, not critics, collectors. People who wanted the aesthetic of resilience without the work, who invited us to speak but asked us to leave out the parts that made them squirm. One brand manager even asked Daisy to soften her tone for a video campaign. She said no, and I backed her up, not as an ally, but as someone who once dimmed his own fire to keep others warm. That was the difference between us and them. They wanted inspiration, we wanted truth, they wanted applause, we wanted consequence. And still, they kept watching. We started getting invitations not from the usual names, but from unexpected places. Small schools, niche collectives, prison education programs, first-gen entrepreneur circles. People who didn't just want to be seen, they wanted to build something real from what they'd been denied. One email stood out. Subject line, "You changed how I see myself." No pitch, no ask, just a link to a project started by a girl who'd attended our first session months ago. Her entire business was built around platforming other erased voices. She called it Echo Room. The tagline was brutal and brilliant. "We don't need microphones, we need listeners who stop interrupting." Daisy printed it, pinned it above her desk. We never went back to the summit, never took a seat at that table, but we didn't have to. The room we built kept filling, not because we fought to be invited, but because we stopped asking, and they kept watching. Let them. They say legacy is what people remember about you when you're gone. I think it's what you leave behind while you're still here, the things that live without needing your permission. 3 days ago, we finished the final round of our mentorship program, 20 young builders, none of them looking for applause, all of them looking for tools, the kind we had to make from scratch. One girl stayed behind after the final session, 17, quiet but never passive. She'd been one of the first to submit her work, sharp, direct, no fluff. She handed me a small card, no speech, just a line written in her slanted handwriting. "You showed me how to stop asking for space and start creating it." I didn't say anything right away, not because I was overwhelmed, because I understood what she meant, deeply. You spend years trying to fit into places that were never designed for you. Then one day, you realize the architecture isn't sacred, it's just old, and it can be changed. That realization, once it takes root, doesn't leave. Daisy and I had talked quietly about what would come next. We'd both been running on momentum for months, event after event, call after call, refusing to shrink, refusing to pause. But sometimes stillness isn't retreat, sometimes it's preparation. So we agreed. One final summit. One we'd design ourselves, not a stage, not a spectacle, just a space where people could walk in without needing to explain the weight they carried. We called it the unwritten room, no branding, no hashtags, just a room with empty chairs and a prompt on the wall. What truth did you stop telling because it made others uncomfortable? Every person who came in wrote something, some on paper, some out loud, some in silence, by staying longer than they meant to. We didn't film it, didn't package it, because not everything needs to be content. Some things are just for those who were there. At the end of the day, when the room was empty again, Daisy turned to me. "You ever think they regret it?" She didn't say who, she didn't have to. We both knew the list. Families who chose comfort over connection, partners who traded people for power, systems that only made room for certain kinds of stories. "I don't think they regret what they did," I said. "I think they regret that we lived anyway." She smiled, not out of spite, but out of peace. The next week, I got a call from Marcus, the old mechanic who messaged me back when the coin surfaced. He sounded different, slower, more deliberate. "Saw your name in the article about the program," he said. "Wanted to say, you didn't just walk away, you built the exit for the rest of us." That line stuck with me, because that's what it had become. Not about revenge, not even about recognition, about building exits, from erasure, from silence, from the idea that you have to stay somewhere just because you started there. That night, I sat in the quiet, and thought about the first day I walked away from Jared's company. No suitcase, no speech, just my tools and the weight of what I wouldn't carry anymore. And now, years later, there were people carrying something different, not my pain, but the blueprint I'd left behind. A few days later, we received one more message. It was from someone I didn't expect, Jared's daughter. She was in college now, studying communications, working on a podcast about untold founder stories. She asked if I'd speak with her, not as the guy her dad wronged, but as someone who understood what happens when legacy gets complicated. I read the message twice. It didn't feel like a trap. It didn't feel like exposure. It felt like a new page, not blank, but uncoated. I called Daisy first. "You think I should do it?" She didn't hesitate. "Only if you talk like you don't owe anyone protection anymore." So I said yes. When the recording day came, it wasn't dramatic. She asked thoughtful questions. Let the silences sit, didn't spin it, just listened. At the end, she asked, "What do you hope people remember about what you built?" And I said, that I stopped waiting to be invited into rooms and started building ones that didn't require permission to enter. The episode aired quietly. No fanfare, just real words, honest ones. A week later, I walked into the Backline studio early. Daisy was already there, reviewing new pitches from mentees. One of them had built a platform called Visible Now. Another had started a fund for first-gen creatives. A third had dropped out of her marketing job and gone independent. None of them asked for our approval. They didn't need it. That was the win. Daisy looked up from the table. "We're not the center anymore," she said. "No," I said. "We're the signal." I still keep the coin. Same place, same frame. Not as a wound, not as a trophy, but as a reminder that the quietest revolutions begin when you stop explaining and start existing on your own terms. And if anyone asks what happened to the people who tried to write us out, tell them we built new chapters and left the door unlocked for anyone brave enough to walk in without asking first. I stopped responding to invitations the day I realized they were just performances with better lighting. Panels, roundtables, collaborations framed as unity. They all had one thing in common. They weren't about the work. They were about narrative control, and we'd already fought too hard to own our stories to give them back for applause. Daisy called it the soft pressure of being palatable. Tell them just enough to make them uncomfortable, but not enough to make them look at themselves. We were done with that kind of telling, so we built slower, quieter. Not because we were hiding, because we were building things that didn't rely on validation. The latest project was Echo Thread, a mentorship model built not on tiers or funding brackets, but on shared lived experience. We paired people not by resumes, but by what they had survived. The waiting list tripled in 2 months. That's when we knew we had something different, something that didn't need marketing. It moved on resonance alone. But with that growth came attention. Again, a venture group offered to fund us. Big check, slick pitch, said all the right words. But when Daisy asked why they were interested, the reply told us everything. "We're investing in stories like yours, ones that feel real, especially in this climate." Feel real, not are real. That was the difference. They wanted our voice but not our control. We declined. Their tone shifted. 2 weeks later, an op-ed appeared on a major business site. Anonymous author, polished language. But the message was clear. The problem with survivor-led leadership is that it centers personal pain instead of scalable process. They didn't name us. They didn't have to. It was targeted, not at our model, but at our presence. Daisy forwarded it to me. No comment, just the link. I replied, "Let them write, we'll build." We didn't post about it. We didn't write a rebuttal. Instead, we launched a new feature on our site, Proof Without Permission, a living archive of impact stories told directly by those we've worked with. No names removed, no edits for optics, no rewording to soften tone. just real voices. The ones they said were too much, too emotional, too angry, too honest. And that archive? It did more than any panel ever could. The comments section flooded, quietly, not viral, not flashy, just hundreds of people recognizing themselves for the first time in someone else's truth. A message landed in our inbox, no subject line, no greeting, just, "I thought I was broken, turns out I was just unedited." Daisy printed it, framed it next to her desk. Then something happened we hadn't prepared for. People started building without us. Local echo threads, new mentorship pods, school-based programs borrowing our structure but not our name. None of them asked for permission, and that was the most honest tribute we could have received. One group in Detroit mailed us a hand-bound booklet with 25 first-person accounts from their inaugural cohort. Each story opened with the same sentence: "I don't owe you a version of me that makes you comfortable." They'd taken one of Daisy's earliest lines and made it their foundation. It didn't feel like legacy, it felt like transfer. This thing we thought we had to protect, it had already outgrown us. One morning, as we prepped for the next wave of applications, Daisy said something I didn't expect. "I think I want to step back." I looked at her, not with surprise, with recognition. "You done?" "No," she said, "just not needed in the same way anymore." She wasn't walking away. She was giving the room back to the people we built it for. I told her I'd follow her lead. We'd stay connected, always. But we didn't need to be at the center anymore. The center had moved, so we held one last session, not for us. For the ones now carrying the work forward, no keynote, no video crew. Just a single table and a prompt written on the wall. What did they call you when they didn't want to hear you, and what do you call yourself now? They filled that board. Word after word. Too loud, difficult, emotional, dangerous, broken. And under each one, architect, strategist, leader, healer, voice. No one erased the old labels. They just wrote new ones louder. We left the building before the answers dried, not as an ending, as release. It's been 6 months since then. Daisy's somewhere up north, teaching part-time, writing under a pseudonym. Her words still reach people, but she doesn't care who gets the credit. Me? I still mentor, still answer emails, still keep the coin framed near my desk. Not because I need to remember what happened, but because I want the next person who walks in to ask about it. So I can say, "This was once a promise, then it was a weapon. Now it's just proof I'm still here." They don't get to edit that, not anymore.